Welcome to the Road to Welvil podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Terrell. Together, we will explore our own wellness journeys, nurturing body, mind, and spirit. Join me as I talk to top wellness professionals from all over the world with a wide range of backgrounds and specialties. I invite you to discover, discuss, and design your own path on the road to Welvil. Welcome, listener. Today I am so excited to introduce you to my dear friend, Freedom Ciavarello. Freedom is an intuitive alchemist, creator, dream weaver, green witch, and she celebrates every day as magic. I'm so curious about some of these words and roles, and I can't wait to hear more from her about them. She is the creator of Moonbeam Daydream, a community all about meditation, plant alchemy, cacao ceremony, and so much more. Basically, uplifting energy in so many of its forms. Freedom, I met you through Elena Brower's mentorship, which I talk about often on the show. Hearing you speak, I was immediately drawn to your energy and your wisdom. And then I started listening to your podcast, and wow, I was hooked. You have so much love and wisdom, and you are so articulate and authentic in how you share it in the world. You really tell your true story, and I really appreciate that, and I really connect with that. So I am really thankful for you to take a little bit of time to chat with me today.
Oh yeah, I'm so happy to be here. It's such a high honor. I'm over the moon.
Welcome. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
yeah, thank you.
So I wanted to, I always like in this podcast to kind of go to the back to the origin story a little bit.
Mhm.
So I think for a lot of people on this healing path, there's an early event or situation that sets you on this path, particularly like holistic health and wellness. So I'm just wondering, was there an early event in your life that sparked your interest in wellness? I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background and how you started your journey.
Oh yeah, definitely. I agree wholeheartedly. There's this way that the path of the healer, the path of the hermetic, and just holistic wellness in general, there's always an instigative sitch.
Mm-hmm.
It's like an opportunity to grow past some of our inheritances.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say the baseline initiation of mine was being highly sensitive, being a
Mm-hmm.
very sensitive child, and growing up in an environment that was not particularly attuned to sensitivity. Almost having a little bit more pride around buttoning up bootstraps and being kind of tough. And then my coping mechanism to deal with that sensitivity evolved into eating disorders.
Mm-hmm.
And the eating disorders are really what took me down the path of holistic healing because I was so exhausted by the modern medical system. Not that there's anything wrong with it,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't working for me. And that's actually how I got introduced to plant allyship and alchemy was through that journey with eating disorders. And it was such a long time. It's only really been less than a decade of being totally clear of them. And so much of my identity kind of got woven into this idea of being disordered, like
Mm-hmm.
out of order. And this reclamation of the inner order, the inner alchemist to kind of remedy all of those things. Harmony, chasing harmony is
Mm.
baseline.
So interesting. I think well, I did have a similar situation when I was younger too. I definitely grew up a highly sensitive little girl, only child, all on my own, and I did develop eating disorders also. From
Wow, I
probably
didn't know
about
that.
seventh
Yeah.
grade. Yeah, I know. I haven't really shared that on this podcast either, but that was a journey that I went through like seventh grade, eighth grade, even into like high school. And I think it was just my way of trying to control things or make sense out of things that I didn't really understand. And something I love that you said earlier when we were talking off of the podcast was about being sensitive. And I think it was about learning how to manage that sensitivity. Where for
Yeah.
me, I think I have for a long time tried to like shut off or shut down. You
Mm.
know, like I don't manage it, I try to cut it off and block it.
Yeah. The sensitivity, it's a superpower,
Mm,
but the popular narrative does not fall in line with that idea. The
mm,
popular narrative sees sensitivity as inconvenient.
mm-hmm,
And what happens often, which kind of sounds like what happened to you or what the invitation was for you at the time, was to disembody in
mm,
order to stay comfortable enough to get through the day,
mm-hmm.
to get through the week, to get through high school,
That feels very
the
true.
family time. Yeah, disembodiment causes confusion. And when there's confusion, there's a lack of identity and connection.
Mm,
So, relationships that we form, experiences that we have, things that we do, they're not grounded. We were talking a little bit off the podcast too about air energy
mm-hmm,
and just this way that we can get very capable of existing in chaotic situations. And then our brain, because it's brilliant, will rewire chaos and define it as safety.
mm,
And so the disorder that starts to come, whether it be psychospiritually or physical, breeds itself. And then without a disruption, without a rewiring, sometimes it's a traumatic event. Um, a popular description would be an intervention. Some people have intervention. That's like a
mm-hmm,
stick and spoke of traumatic behaviors. Um, but we grow up thinking that it's us, like we're doing something, because when we're little, we absorb the whole situation. My patterns of disordered eating, is what I always call it, started when I was 6 years old,
mm,
and I was like a child.
mm-hmm,
And it does come from, I just want to validate what you're saying about control. It does come from, most often, kids can't control anything except what they eat or what
mm,
they say.
mm-hmm,
My coping was like I stopped eating and I stopped talking.
mm.
It's hard to
Wow.
believe now, all the time, but I didn't speak for
Mm,
years. I was just in
wow.
the corner, like observing.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. So how did you find your way out of that? Like, I'm sure it was a long process, but
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because when we meet people, like we meet them and they're them forever. Like meeting you, my mind and sometimes my brain is going to be like, that's her story since forever,
mm,
because it's like my first introduction.
mm-hmm,
And when I think about the other freedoms that have existed and the other freedoms that will exist, and then there's this freedom right now, like when she looks back at the other freedom, so much of it came from finding this clarity around hypocrisy. There
mm,
was such hypocrisy in my environment around everything, especially in school. I had a lot of
mm,
things about school.
mm-hmm,
And I'm from Hollywood, California. I was born and raised in Hollywood, which is where diet culture comes from. I
mm-hmm.
also grew up around the Cali vibe,
Right.
which is not your normal vibe. I mean,
Mm-hmm. Right.
Cali, especially SoCal, it kind of has a whole mood going on with the
Mm-hmm.
body image stuff. And I'm of the generation too. I'm a millennial. I'm like a elder millennial, zennial even, where we had like the Kate Moss and the
Mm-hmm.
Calvin Klein thing come out when we were teenagers. So, it created an aesthetic to say the least. But I remember like getting really into E. E. Cummings, who's a
Mm,
poet
mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
does not use punctuation,
Right. Or capitals or
anything.
yeah.
And I was like, just a second here. There is a way to do whatever the F you want. Just a second here. And it was so liberating.
Yeah.
I also moved schools. I moved from a college preparatory magnet school into a very urban performing arts magnet school,
Mm,
and got a lot of opportunity to start expressing myself in different ways
mm,
and take on different characters
mm-hmm.
to kind of learn more about who the actual freedom was through trying on different personas with theater and everything.
That's so cool. This is like a little bit off topic, but I just started reading. Don Miguel Ruiz has this new book called The Actor, which is kind of, I think, a little bit what you're talking about, like taking on these roles and stuff. I only just started reading it right now, but just a plug for that book. I just started it, and I love his book, The Four Agreements.
Mm-hmm.
So simple, but so powerful. So, yeah, if anyone's listening and interested in what Freedom's talking about, check out this book, The Actor. Like I said, I haven't finished it yet, but I'm really into it. And you could probably, I think you could read it like in a week. It's like designed like one day is a different activity for like a week. It's like this big. So that just,
Great,
yeah, it
like,
made me think about what you were saying.
mm-hmm.
Going back like a little while ago, you were talking about air energy and we're talking about energy. And we talk about energy quite a bit on this podcast. So I was just wondering, what is your definition of energy and how does energy affect our lives?
Oh my gosh, energy is everything.
Mm,
Energy is everything. And that might be vague, but there's a way that energy invests in everything. Energy is a frequency, it's a vibration. I think the way that I think of energy the most is that it's a currency.
mm,
It's like something that we spend and save, invest, that we venture into. Energy is the magnet that everything is attracted to.
mm. And it flows maybe kind of like that too, right? It's like this flow, like you were saying, in, out, invest, flows in from different sources and out to different sources. Sounds like that's
Yeah.
what you're saying. Yeah.
Energy is like, yeah, exactly. It's like a language.
Mm,
It's kind of, I mean, it really is everything to me. And I think it's pervasive in the
mm-hmm,
best way. It pervades everything. And I think once we begin to believe that energy is everything, then we are energy and we can do anything.
mm,
There's this sort of connection that comes from that quantum awareness of what energy can do because it's exponential. It's also remedial. It's it's everything. The thing that happens to the human, the mind, if you say anything is possible, everything is happening, it starts to look for evidence. Your mind is wired to look
mm,
for evidence and
mm-hmm,
logic and discern and reason. And that's where it kind of gets tricky with definition. Energy is like a felt sensation that the human can interact with. We measure that interaction with our mind and our experiences. It's like energy meets us where we are too.
mm,
Like we can be tired and then our friend calls us and we're excited again.
mm-hmm,
Like energy, it's like it's real and not real. Like we
mm-hmm,
can bend it. It's just like time. Time
mm,
is real and not real because the time itself isn't real, but what we do with the time is. It's the
mm,
same thing with energy. Like we
mm.
are composed of energy too. We're like a collection, speaking of, we're a collection of calories.
Mm-hmm.
We became a solid thing because we transmuted that energy.
Mm.
It's a little wild, but
Yeah. Well, transmuting energy makes me think of alchemy. And I
mm,
know that one of the things that you do is plant alchemy.
mhm.
So, can you talk a little bit? And that does that have to do with transitioning energy? And can you tell us a little bit more about what that means?
Oh yeah. Alchemy is like the biggest open secret of being alive. Alchemy is defined in many ways. Ultimately, alchemy is harmonizing. Alchemy is the harmonization of energy through the
Mm,
elements, elemental composition. So you have fire, earth, air, and water. And then in some traditions, you also have ether. or spirit, which is kind of the energy essence of it all, the
Mm.
like unseen and yet felt knowing inside the divine spark that makes
Mm.
the human life. That's the ether energy. um, we all are composed of different elements in different ratios, and every other thing is also composed of different elements in different ratios. Alchemy is the ability to find one's own composition or place of orientation, and the opposite things, composition or place of orientation, and then create harmony by merging
Mm.
different elements or compositions in the opposite.
Mm.
So it's a lot of words. A simple way to think of it is if you're going into a situation that is very excited, there's an excess of fire energy, and you're coming into the situation really fatigued, there's an excess of earth energy, then you would want to play with water energy to tone that fire down. Or if you want to join in, you'd want air energy to light that fire up.
Mm.
In action steps, that would be going with compassion in the water energy, or excitement, investment, like getting more interested in the conversation with the air energy.
Mm.
That makes sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how did the plants come into that alchemy?
So the plants all have different alchemical associations. And like all the other living things, they're composed of different elements.
Mm.
So I follow a system that is fruits are fire, woods, resins, and barks are earth, the flowers are water, low key favorite,
Mm.
and then the leaves are air.
Mm.
Then ether or spirit is seeds and things that work with the Akashic record, things
Mm.
like cardamom, things like frankincense, like we were talking
Mm.
about. The way that we can interact physiologically for holistic wellness, like part of what I incorporate into coaching and programs, finding someone's alchemical composition and then meeting them with the opposite with a plant ally, an herbal remedy. This can be essential oil, tincture, tea, flower essence, or literally working with the plant itself.
Mm.
The plant queendom has everything that the human being will ever need. It doesn't always have everything the human being will ever want.
Mm.
And so there's an interesting conversation that comes reconciling the difference between need and want. That's a lot of alchemical opportunity there. Each plant will have a dominant element. An example, we'll use geranium. That's my it's my favorite essential oil. It's not my favorite flower, but for essential oils, it's my
We won't
favorite.
tell the other essential oils
I
using
know.
that.
We'll just keep it our little
Okay.
secret.
Okay.
Our secret here. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Geranium's water, and water has to do with memory. Geranium is used to help with grief and trust. A lot of grief comes from memory, a lot of trust. We remember why we don't trust or do trust with our memory. And our whole body, even though it's solid in structure, it's cellular. So it's actually water.
Mm.
And when we take in geranium or we use geranium topically, even on the organs like the liver for grief, that's also where grief and anger are held, or the heart, that's where we hold trust. And we take this plant energy that also has a water element to it, and we use it to process emotions associated with water. We have this like personal superhero in the form of a plant that is portable, accessible, and abundant. The earth produces in abundance plants.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be opportunity to limit scarcity. The scarcity is kind of, I mean, I think scarcity and disembodiment are the epidemic of our time.
Mm.
In the popular culture, the popular narrative, just by evidencing, you
Mm-hmm.
know, the earth multiplies everything. You put a seed in the ground, you get 500 apples. Like, it's a very clear portal of evidence based study. Like, it's not super crazy to notice that part, but we impart other things onto that abundance. Like, only certain people can have the apples, or the
Mm.
apples cost a certain amount, or, whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
There's always going to be creativity there. And abundance is one's own birthright
Mm.
because we're made of the earth. We're composed of the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like,
So
dumb.
I like what you said about disembodiment and scarcity being like the, you didn't say scourge, but something like that of our society right now. And I agree. And we're talking earlier with talking about eating disorders. I still think I struggle with disembodiment, and I do have those scarcity moments. Do you think geranium is good for those situations, or do you have any other like practical tips or recommendations for people that might resonate with what you're saying?
Oh yeah. Well, geranium was my gateway oil into essential oils. I had studied herbalism a little bit before. I'm an alchemical herbalist now. There are different ways to use different parts of the plant. Essential oils are hyper concentrated, volatile organic compounds. So I'll say that first. They're very powerful. Geranium was recommended to me by a practitioner that specialized in somatic work. I work a lot in somatics, which is using the felt sense of the body to interact with things that can't be quantified, like emotion. We
Would you
use
say, I'm sorry, I want to clarify that more. So is that like a muscle testing? Is that somatic or is that totally different?
muscle testing. Well,
Okay. Or is that an
I would
example?
say you could call that a somatic practice.
Okay.
There are somatic meditations. Somatic, somatic in air quotes I'm doing for those of you
Okay.
that are just listening, had a buzz moment.
Okay.
It had like a matcha moment where
Okay.
everyone was somatic, like it's like matcha everywhere.
Right.
Which is fine.
Yeah.
Personally, I'm obsessed with matcha. I drink it every
Yeah,
day.
me too. But
It's
I missed the somatic moment. So I just need you to like clarify for me a little more.
yeah. Oh, this is exciting. So,
Hmm.
well, somatic. This is what I'm saying that it had a moment. Is that it had a lot of definitions go out via social media at once. My understanding, the best way I can describe it is that it's using the felt sensations of the body. So it's an embodiment practice
Mm.
that is connected to breath and sensation at the same time. So you could say that yoga is a somatic practice.
Mm.
And then there are somatic practitioners that do a little bit more in depth specificity with there's a sensation in the lower right abdomen going into that sensation, communicating with it like it's a person,
Mm.
and then breathing through these emotional psychospiritual blocks
Mm.
with the assistance of other tools, maybe like muscle testing,
Mm.
maybe like essential oils. The most important thing about somatic experiencing slash wellness, healing, holistic things is to remember that though we are all the same, we're also so different.
Mm-hmm.
And our genetics, our DNA is turned on and off at different rates and with different circumstances. So when you start working with plants, sometimes people try one and it doesn't, nothing happens. But there are so many other ones.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many other teachers, healers, practitioners.
Mm-hmm.
Somatic, it's especially important to get to know the person that is facilitating because it's trauma work,
Mm-hmm.
going often into trauma because that's the nature of what we hold on to. As
Mm-hmm.
human animals, we hold on to trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Eating disorders are a deep trauma that has a lot to do, it manifests often in the diaphragmatic section of your body, especially if you had bulimia
Mm.
or binge eating disorders. I hate to say disorders because it's not really a disorder, it's just a
Mm-hmm.
mismatch.
Mm-hmm.
I like to say your mind and your body are mismatched,
Yeah.
versus anorexic behavior, which is a withholding.
Mm-hmm.
That's more of like a collapse in the shoulders and
Mm-hmm.
like a fear, like a smallness.
That was me for sure.
Yeah. It's a whole, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing with smallness, it's kind of like it is scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it never, we're never small enough.
Mm-hmm.
And then dysmorphia develops.
Mm-hmm.
Our brain can't actually accurately see us.
Mm-hmm.
And there's actually some really, I'm remembering this moment where I was out shopping, and my mom was like really confused at the clothing I was picking out, because shopping was always kind of low key traumatic when you're in that state of mind. But she was so confused at what I was picking out because it was just such the wrong size,
Mm-hmm.
like way too big.
Mm-hmm.
But I never saw myself as small.
Mm-hmm.
And the tricky thing, which I'm sure you understand, with eating disorders, patterns of disordered eating, mismatches from the inside, is they're not people, it's like alcoholism. People can be
Mm-hmm.
highly functional, seem totally fine, and they're not.
Mm-hmm.
There's this sort of like hiding in plain sight aspect to a lot of that stuff. I can kind of go on tangents with disordered eating forever because it was so impactful. But in terms of scarcity, the abundance learning comes from seeing food as a kind of medicine, seeing plants as a kind of support system, and knowing that there's a language that the earth shares with your DNA
Mm.
that's
Yeah.
universal. Yeah.
I like that, and I do think for me, like one thing that helped me find a healthier way of eating, which was, I think, towards like the end of high school, I kind of figured out that I really liked food, and I liked, it
Yeah.
was funny because when I was not eating a lot, I was eating like cereal, and I was eating not very healthy things. But then I discovered like this love and this passion of like healthy food, kind of like what you were saying, like seeing the
Yeah.
abundance and seeing what was out there. And I think that for me, helped me move through that eating pattern. And probably some other like therapy work I did too as I got a little bit older. But thank you for
Awesome.
sharing your story and all that stuff. Is there an oil or like certain things that you would recommend as far as scarcity besides geranium? Like, are there some oils that might help, or plant alchemy that might help someone who has that scarcity mindset, whether it's money or health or whatever?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, my go to for abundance is wild orange.
Mm,
Wild orange is the oil of abundance.
mm,
It's like sunshine in a bottle, super uplifting, very forgiving. That's a citrus, which is a fruit, so it's a fire element. It's igniting,
mm,
it's very invigorating, inspiring. Green mandarin is another citrus that I love for that. That's the oil of pure potential energy, and the way that we can make things kinetic. We can take action and find our own version of forward. Jasmine is
mm,
really important too, because jasmine harmonizes the sacral chakra and sacral energy. So, our ability to create in spite of other situations that we might have experienced that were less creative, you can have a sacral center active, healthy, free, man or woman. Sometimes it's thought of as only women, but it's actually both. Everyone has that creative energy. A lot of times the masculine comes from more of a center chakra space of
mm,
production,
mm,
but we're in a new time now where there's a lot of bent language around gender and things. So without going too far into that, I just like to include that all of these energies are accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Green mandarin, yeah, oh my gosh, the jasmine. I think if you're working with wounds that won't heal, like old inherited ideas around scarcity, helichrysum is one
Mm.
of my favorites too. Helichrysum on the heart, on the pulse points. That's a really nice one to qualify the feeling, especially for the heart. Any kind of dispersed air energy. The heart is also air
Mm.
energy. Helichrysum, you can, it's also called life everlasting flower. It was really important when people were working alchemically with immortality. They
Mm.
would use helichrysum to inspire immortality by drinking it. It's
Mm.
also used to set bones.
Mm.
So it's a very powerful restructuring plant.
Mm.
There's a saying about helichrysum for wounds that will not heal and for the walking wounded, for the
Mm.
wounded that are still walking. Helichrysum was imperative in my journey. I've recently developed a practice almost daily with helichrysum. I don't know if you've heard of Tiffany Carroll, but she is a goddess. I
Mm.
highly recommend anyone that's listening, if you're
Great.
curious
We'll
about,
link her website. She has a website, right? We'll link her website in the show notes.
oh yeah, she's amazing. And the last one for disordered eating patterns, specifically grapefruit,
Mm.
um, is about honoring the body. As you can see, there's a fire element idea
Mm-hmm.
developing here. There's a
Yeah.
lot of fruits and citruses because it's the willingness to keep going, it's the ignition switch. There's metabolism, that has a connotation when you're in eating disorder land.
Right.
Metabolism is kind of a four-letter word, but it's actually just momentum,
Mm.
able to go moment to moment, and that's citrus.
Mm.
Yeah.
And would you say, same, maybe we talked about this before, but for the disembodiment, do you
Mm.
think that there's any kind of plants or anything that you recommend to kind of reclaim your body?
Mm-hmm. I love these questions and these conversations because the the elemental composition that we all have, when one discovers what their dominant elements are, they have an invincibility to their environment because all of a sudden the elements will be everywhere. And you'll be able to identify what element you're feeling. Like a disembodiment is a hyper orientation to air. It's very
Mm.
excessive air. The opposite element of air is earth. And
Mm.
so to harmonize, to
Mm-hmm.
alchemize, you want earth.
Mm.
And there's different kinds of earth. There's something like cedar wood, that's the oil of community, that would help with feeling ungrounded in terms of like not feeling like we know anyone that understands us. That's a
Mm-hmm.
cedar wood situation.
Mm.
Versus something like vetiver is a root under the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Roots hold the ground together.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like a severe ungrounding, like an earthquake of the soul. And then there's woods, there's earth element like cinnamon, which is a bark,
Mm.
which is kind of a heated way of understanding our embodied essence. Cinnamon is one of my favorite oils too. It's actually like a circulatory
Mm.
orientation too. So if you're feeling like you can't feel yourself,
Mm.
cinnamon is really nice, diluted because it's a
Mm-hmm.
hot oil.
Yeah.
On the bottoms of the feet, especially, or back behind the kidneys.
Mm.
Um,
I'm gonna try that
basil
one.
is
I
like a,
always have like cold
yeah.
hands and feet. I'm like that person, which I know is about circulation. I had like a
Yeah.
Kundalini yoga teacher once who was like, "You need this for your circulation." Like he could
Mhm.
see it on my face when I walked in. So I know that I'm gonna try that cinnamon. And then I was thinking too about what you were talking about roots. I mean, do you think also with what you eat? Like I try to eat in sort
Yes.
of like an Ayurvedic seasonal way of like I know Vata season is always fall, coming into winter. So I try to eat a lot of like root vegetables, then carrots, beets. So
Mhm.
even eating the plants, right, can be
Yeah,
alchemizing.
that's the glorious part. Like the grace and the gratitude of the earth is going alongside her seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes, we can get tomatoes at 2 a.m. in February. I don't think it's a great idea though,
Mm-hmm.
because it's effing with the earth's rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
There are no better tomatoes than the ones that come in July. You
Right.
know, we can preserve them, we can freeze them, things like that. But when we produce them all year, it's like we're telling the earth, like, you're not good enough, boo. Like you didn't
Right.
make enough for us, you know?
Yeah.
When really it's like she did, and they
I
were
want
perfect.
this right now. Yeah. Actually, I was just talking to the holistic pharmacist today on our Instagram live, and we were talking about this. She was talking about,
Oh,
shopping
that's
at the
cool.
farmer's market. And we were talking about, how that really helps dial you into what's locally in season. And
Mhm.
then getting creative with that kind of stuff with food. All right, so we've talked about essential oils. We've talked about how you can get in your diet. I know that you also are a practitioner of something called a cacao ceremony. So I'm
Oh,
super interested in like what is that all about?
yeah. Yes, queen. So my favorite plant ally is cacao. Cacao is a seed, it's a bean. So it's the Akashic records, the ether element, just to put that out there. Cacao is a remedy for heartbreak of any sort. It's fortifying for the blood. It's one of the most complex things on the planet. It was traded as currency. It's like gold.
Mm.
And one of the things about alchemy is always turning lead into gold,
Mm-hmm.
like lemons into lemonade or cacao beans into ceremony. There's a magic to cacao. I discovered cacao, or she discovered me. She came to me um, almost 5 years ago now. And I'll never forget my first experience with it. I, this is like, when I was in eating disorder land, I told myself, I convinced myself that I didn't like chocolate because I was afraid of chocolate. Chocolate was a
Mm.
fear food. And
Mm-hmm.
I went years without eating chocolate. So, I mean, it is just so cosmic to me that now, like, I mean, 40% of my diet is chocolate now. It's like insane. Now it's
So
like cacao
good.
all the time, in between the truffles and the cacao itself. um, I went into chocolate making. I started apprenticing as a chocolate maker because I just suddenly got really obsessed, seemingly out of nowhere, with this idea of cacao. I had these hormonal issues, and I found in my personal research, a lot of it had to do with the HB axis in our brain, the relationship that our thyroid has to our ovaries, and I learned a lot from this woman called Aviva Ram. She's a holistic MD back east
Mm.
in New York. I haven't met her personally, but I've read her books and things, and she speaks a lot about this.
Oh, good. We'll have to link her too.
I
We'll
know
get her
there's so
information and link
many.
in the notes. Yeah. So tell me about her.
Yeah, she's amazing. She's queen energy because she's over 50. When you turn 50, you get queen energy,
Mm.
50 to 65, and then you become crone energy.
Mm.
Before that it's mother, and then even before that it's maiden energy. So
Mm.
there's a cycle to the feminine with the archetypes.
Mm-hmm.
Cacao is crone wisdom. Cacao is ancient wisdom. Cacao ceremony is any time that you spend with cacao as in reverence to the earth, so you can make your own cacao practices. When I first started, I entered through the gate of ceremonial cacao that I found on the internet after I had been recommended a brand from a friend of mine that I was apprenticing with, because I was thinking about becoming a chocolate maker. Which is funny now because even 5 years later, now I'm like a chocolate seller
Mm.
because I have the cacao and the truffles. But what I learned in this process about cacao is that it's like the secret weapon of the universe. It's a medicine for the heart. When you do cacao ceremony, you do 2 ounces of ceremonial grade single origin cacao. The quality is really important. It's the most important thing. The places where cacao grows, they are a little bit more alternative. Places like Guatemala, along the equator, the cacao butter is more valuable for cosmetics and things like that. So these smaller countries, kind of like coffee trading,
Mm-hmm.
they sometimes sell the butter, and then there's cacao powder that gets made from the remaining part of the bean, but that's not this.
Okay.
This is different. This is ceremonial grade cacao. It's the whole bean that's fermented in the sun and then pressed into a paste and then
Mm.
ground or chopped into a powder and then put into water.
Okay.
Um, so that's the little thing there. It's 2 ounces, which might seem like a lot, but it's just enough. Once you have a ceremony, it'll just be hooked forever because it's so good. It's so
Mm.
fortifying. 80% more oxygen flushes your body. Your whole lymphatic system gets flushed with oxygen.
Mm.
It essentially restarts your whole circulatory system, moves everything. It's very high in magnesium and fiber too. It's a superfood,
Mm.
essentially. It
Mm-hmm.
had a moment, like all the companies had the cacao powder and things. Those
Mm-hmm.
aren't bad. It's just
Mm-hmm.
that they're not the same energetically because it's a split. There's no butter in it. There's no
Mm-hmm.
fat content in cacao butter.
Mm-hmm.
Ceremonial cacao has all of the fats in it. Oils bond to other oils. Oil and water don't mix.
Mm-hmm.
So to get the magic into the cells, the oil from the cacao has to hit the lipid rim of your cell and then it merges in, gets
Mm.
absorbed.
Okay.
A lot of our body now, modern life, we struggle with absorption. Like you were
Mm-hmm.
talking about Ayurveda, it's not
Mm-hmm.
what we eat, it's what we absorb.
Mm.
That's a whole mood. So
Mm-hmm.
cacao is like this gift from the goddess, and it also happens to have something called thermobromine in it, which is the bliss chemical. It's something that our brain exerts when we're really happy or excited. And when you drink cacao, you have this kind of uplift. It's kind of like a high feeling, but it's not jittery like caffeine. A lot of people replace their coffee with cacao.
Mm.
Sometimes I go rogue and I'll put cacao in my coffee, kind
Mm-hmm.
of like bulletproof coffee. Like when you add fat to it,
Mm-hmm.
your body absorbs it slower,
Mm-hmm. Right.
caffeine. And so it like this cacao I'm drinking right now has a little bit of matcha in it. It gives it like a different flavor. This is Bali cacao. Each cacao has a personality,
Mm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
There's so much to say about cacao ceremony. The basic idea is a reverence practice, a kind of prayer for the earth, gratitude prayer for the earth, and a remedy for the common confusion of humanness. Like sitting with a cup of something is a tradition that's just ages old, especially a warm cup of something, right? She's like, cheers, boo. And cacao just brings such joy
Mm-hmm.
to life. Yeah. Cacao ceremony. I have ceremonies every new moon that are digital now. They used to be in person. Um, and when we open up again as a world, they will be coming back for sure because cacao really like, so she has a Devi, she has a goddess that you can worship essentially, which I do every day because cacao is like literally a food group for me now. It's
Mm-hmm.
like I haven't not had cacao in 5 years, like every single day. It's just been a
Mm.
thing. Not always a ceremonial dose
Mm-hmm.
because, there's enough air already,
Right. Yeah.
but just to touch base with this like element
Mm-hmm.
is really important. Um,
So,
Yeah, there.
if my listener wanted to get in on your cacao ceremony, how does that work?
Oh my gosh. Yes. Well, the best way is to join the mailing list on moonbeamdaydream.com. The mailing list will also come with a little morning routine, like thank you so much for joining the party PDF. That's pretty cool. Incorporates how to start your little cacao ritual in the morning. And then I also sell ceremonial cacao on the website that comes with a little instruction about how to do ceremony. I'm super transparent with my entire company. If anyone wanted to do a phone call, how do I do this cacao? I do that all the time. People, I mean, my cell phone's on the website, like people can contact me directly. But
Right
the
on.
community thing, every new moon, and then they're often happening on the high holy days. The next one is Beltane, which is May Day, May 1st.
Mm.
There's a day retreat where we do cacao ceremony. The event calendar, though, on the
Okay,
website.
check out the invalid calendar. And those are virtual events for now, you said?
They're virtual right now. Yeah.
That's awesome. Then anybody can jump in from anywhere in
No.
the world.
It's been really, I've been very enlightened this last year with the internet.
Yeah, I know. I love it. You can do
Who
so
knew?
much. So, kind of to piggyback on that, like I just want to know, you talked about moonbeamdaydream.com, your website.
Mhm.
Um, how else can listeners find you?
Oh my gosh. Well, there's Minbeam Daydream on TikTok, which is my new favorite thing.
Yeah.
And then Moonbeam underscore Daydream is my Instagram. That Instagram links to all of the other things. That's probably the easiest way
Mm,
to get into everything, as well as the mailing list on the website. And then my podcast is Moonbeam Moments, and that's on iTunes and Spotify. It's also on Google Podcasts too. And you can get linked to that through the Instagram, or you can stream it live on the website now too.
nice. Yeah, that's how I got hooked on my Moonbeam Daydream is that website or the
So fun.
podcast was like I got so hooked on it, I just binged it. I love your
So
podcast.
great.
Yeah.
So awesome.
Before I let you go, thank you so much for jumping on here. I was just wondering if you had any other practical takeaways for any listeners who might be going through painful times right now.
Oh, yes. Well, you know, compassion is a kind of currency. And we have to be patient with ourselves in these new times. I always say, and this is my mother's wisdom, everyone is doing the best they can
Mm,
at the level of awareness that they have. And just giving yourself this grace around what you are able to do today. Because whatever you get done today is enough.
mm,
There's always going to be an opportunity to do more, always. But whatever you do is enough.
mm, mm-hmm.
You're going through a time where you're like, the world's passing me by, all these things are happening. Just try to remember, you're a miracle. There's no accident that you're on this planet at this time. And, there's a cape underneath, right underneath. There's wings right underneath. And that's a powerful place to be.
I love that visualization. There are wings underneath there. It's like you're a superhero with your superpowers, right? Yeah, you're on
Yeah.
this earth for a reason. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Freedom, for joining us today. It was such a pleasure. And
Oh,
I always say to my guests, until next time. So I can't wait until the next time we chat.
oh, that'd be amazing.
All right. Love you, girl. Thank you so much for joining us today. To learn more about today's guest and a wide range of other wellness professionals, please visit our global wellness community at welvil.com. WELVIL.com. I look forward to meeting you next time on the road to Welvil.